Oh my gosh. Oh, what a fantastic story. What heart? What noble sacrifice? What? Are you sleeping right now? Huh? What? Is plot happening? Is the plot going forward? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Is plot happening? Gamers, I'm back. I finally finished the MSQ. I have comments. I have concerns, but I don't have a hotline to call. So we're putting this one on YouTube instead. Quick disclaimer, this should be obvious if you've clicked on this video, but there's going to be spoilers for Dawntrail, like all of it, right? If there's anything you don't want spoiled, like anything, get out now. I'm literally about to play a cutscene from the very end of the game, and if you don't leave, it will be ruined for you, okay? I'm not joking at all, even a little bit. Ready? 3, 2, 1, Jen, play the cutscene.
Queen Sphene?
Zorolja is gone. There's no need to fight anymore.
All right, guys, one more disclaimer before we get going. This is not a review. Do not take it as such. I wasn't joking before. I really just do have comments and concerns, and this is just that. It's my impressions, it's my feelings about Dawntrail's main story quests, all right? So keep that in mind. Okay, let's go. First things first, I put out a video recently when I was about halfway through the MSQ. It's not required viewing. I'm not going to do that YouTuber thing, but I did want to mention it because after finishing the Rite of Succession, I was feeling pretty mixed about the story. And I want to recognize that right away here in the beginning, that having finished the whole story now, I do feel a little bit differently about certain aspects. Some things I view a lot more positively now in hindsight, and others, well, let's just talk about it. Let's start with the Rite of Succession, right? In case you haven't played Dawntrail and are just here because you love being spoiled, the plot of Dawntrail begins with us being taken to meet the Dawn Servant, basically the king of Tyrol, Jarul Jaja, who needs to choose an heir to his throne because he's frankly old as fuck. No joke, he united Tyrol 80 years ago. This guy thinks of dinosaurs as pets, not museum artifacts. So he gets his 3 kids together, most of whom are adopted. Plus one guy who won a fighting tournament recently, and he has them compete in a contest to see who should be the next ruler of his country. So right off the bat, I think this feels a little odd, or at least it did to me. And the more I think about it, the weirder it feels, frankly. Maybe I'm alone in this, but let me just get this out here, right? The impression that we get from Wiklamat is that Tyrol, despite being a young-ish nation, is very diverse, right? Generally accepting of new traditions and new technologies, basically a fairly forward-thinking nation, one that could be accepting of a new direction in governance, which makes this contest feel kind of odd to me, especially the more I think about it, especially in hindsight, right? Like, just think about it for a minute. 100-year-old Grandpa Lizard recognizes his country needs new leadership. So he turns to his 20-something kids, putting aside questions about the gigantic age difference. Like, why do this? Are there not any advisors who would better fit the throne? Is the idea of creating a council of people who, I don't know, have experience, is that so crazy? Like, in your entire nation, there's no one who's better suited to govern than your 20-something kiddos and a guy who won big at Evo Tyrol? Like, I know that in Final Fantasy XIV, the governments of countries and city-states don't share the same kind of political history that we do in real life. I don't know. And again, maybe this is just me, okay? But it seems like this whole premise, maybe this is just a good place to, like, introduce, I don't know, like, maybe not democracy, right? But something. Better yet, like, here's an idea, right? What if instead of a Rite of Succession, our mission was to go to Tyrol and journey to every corner of the continent, collecting members for some kind of nationwide council of rulers, right? Along the way, we get to know the different cultures and communities and help them with problems that only the Warrior of Light can solve. Meanwhile, a new villain is conducting sinister machinations from the shadows. Now, I know this sounds a little generic and frankly not even that different from what we actually ended up doing in the Rite of Succession, but I mean that's kind of the point. I liked a lot of the activities we did along the way. Slaying Valley Garmonda, uncovering the weird eugenics breeding program that the lizard dudes are up to, talking to the giants about death, and remembering the departed and how they do that. Doing stuff like that without the Rite of Succession, I think could have actually been a really good way to bring more combat into the MSQ for the player, put us in like a little bit more of a central role. Something that a lot of people I think felt was lacking with Dawntrail. In hindsight now, parts of the story where we just wait at a ranch while Wooklamot farts off to tame an alpaca feels just so confusing to me. Like, imagine if there was no contest, but we still have to curry favor with different tribes and communities. Like, take the bird people, for instance, right? Instead of just building a float for them, maybe we have to slay one of those infamous Tyrol kaiju monsters as well, because it's preventing them from being able to have their little parade. We can still get like all the lore, all the world flavor, stuff like that that frankly I really liked, by the way. But we get to spend our time being adventurers. Kind of like what it looked like Estinian was doing in the cinematic. Speaking of which, did that monster ever show up in game? Like, maybe I forgot, but I don't remember seeing that dude at all. Anyways, look, I'm not saying 100% that my pitch here would be a better idea than theirs. I can definitely see people writing that comment right now, like, you're not a writer, you don't know what you're talking about, they have to consider this and that. I'm like, well, listen, just stop. Don't post it, I don't care. No one else does either. Oh, actually, while you're down below the video though, make sure you sub to the channel and leave a like on this video. I did a promotion. Are we happy now? Cool. Yes. Good. All right. Moving on. Yeah. Like I was saying, I'm not a writer. I don't think I necessarily could have written a better story than what they gave us, but I do think the ideas that I just kind of pitched right now would address some of the problems I think a lot of people had with Dawntrail's MSQ, particularly the need to attach us at the hip to one specific character for the overwhelming majority of the story. But before I spend 10 minutes doing a Wooklamot rant, let me just stop myself and get through more of this, okay? The end of the Rite of Succession has a lot going on, okay? Wooklamot getting Koana on her side was actually like really cute, I think. Seeing siblings support each other is really nice. That gets me. I'm not above it. But I will point out that this ends our rivalry with Thancred and Norianje with very little fanfare, and I have more thoughts. We'll circle back on this. The Sky Deep Cenote, the level 95 dungeon, it's fantastic. One of my favorites in the whole game for sure. And one of the best examples of the devs using that like single corridor dungeon design to take us on like a little theme park ride. I absolutely love it. However, it leads to probably one of the biggest blue balls moments in the entire game, where we find the gate to the City of Gold, only to turn around and leave without even opening it. But there's that part after the ceremony where Wooklamot asks us to stay in Tyrol and be her BFF forever, which is, I don't know, it kind of felt like being asked to be the best man in the wedding for someone who I don't really like. Like, the question itself just kind of angers me, which is, I guess, kind of an achievement. I don't know. Maybe you guys felt differently about this midway point, but for me, this was like a mid-season finale that just didn't work. And this was the last taste of story I got for my last video, which I think explains a lot of like my mixed feelings I had in that one. This is surprisingly one of my favorites, partially because it felt like the longest break that we got from interacting with Wooklamot, but even putting that stuff aside, I had a lot of fun farting off to do my own little adventure, and I kind of wish we'd gotten more zones like this, where it feels like we're just traveling with a cohort instead of just playing second fiddle to like the DM's self-insert character. I've seen a lot of complaints actually about the Texas zone, but frankly, I just don't get it. Like, is it just the accents? I'll admit it was a little weird at first hearing American accents in 14, but I mean, we've got Thavner, Tuliolel, there are other places that have region-specific accents, and well, I understand that might not work for everybody. It didn't really ruin it for me. I had fun, and seeing the reflections of the trolley guys from Shadowbringers gave me a lot of like those perfect warm fuzzy feelings, and I actually really like the stuff with building the train. Like, getting all of our allies together to help us with the big important project is something that they've been doing for multiple expansions in a row at this point. It's become a staple, and I kind of just love it. Yeah, I'm here for it. I've seen a lot of complaints about the song that plays in that scene, calling it like, people calling it like very Disney. Yeah, I don't know. It's not that bad. It's like, it's not the strongest song in the game, for sure. If you want to say that it's mid, whatever, fine. But yeah, I don't think it's like, especially not in that scene. Oh shit, actually, hang on. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Before we put all of that very flammable, very heavy wood on that train, Tuliolal actually gets attacked by cyber soldiers from the Tron world, so we run back there. The city's under attack, everyone's banding together to fight back, and we head to the palace just in time to see Zerul Jah fight against his father. Zerul Jah seemingly wins at first, but his son is resurrected by some crazy new technology and strikes him down. And it's kind of unfortunate, but I gotta say, this is another thing that has soured for me the more that I've thought about it. Like, why does the old guy accept this duel with his son? I think like during the scene, Kawana even says to you like, oh, Zerul Jah won't beat Zerul Jah because he's never been his equal in combat, which is like an absurd thing to say. Like, yeah, I don't think my kid has ever beat me in Super Smash Brothers, but if she showed up one day looking like Cyborg from Teen Titans, refused a controller, and instead just like plugged a USB port in her fingers straight into my Switch, I'd be pretty worried she's about to fucking demolish me. That said, like Gagul Jaja's final moments I think are pretty well written. In the moment, it worked for me at least, which I guess is kind of the most important thing here. And the way they talked about him not really leaving us because we'll remember him is, I think, a really good callback to the way that the Giants don't consider people dead as long as they're remembered, which I think speaks to the strongest theme in this expansion, like the idea that people aren't really gone until they're forgotten. Kind of a side note here, at this point in the story, I should also mention that pretty much all of the Scions have finished making their way to Taral, and now that we're all here and united in purpose, I am reminded of that thing I kind of mentioned earlier. Wasn't there supposed to be some kind of division amongst the Scions in this expansion? Like, there was one short blink and you miss it moment in one dungeon where Thancred and Urianger block your path and make you take the long way around. And obviously, they sided with Quana instead of Wuklamot. But despite that, it never really felt like we were at odds with any of our friends. And I'm kind of left wondering here, like, is this disappointment that I'm feeling, is this my fault? Like, because I watched the keynotes at each fan fest, I ate up all the marketing for this expansion. Is this on me? I do think that like fans need to manage their expectations, but even still, I kind of lean towards no. I don't feel like this should be my fault, right? Like, I'm a mega fan of 14. Like, look at my fucking shirt, right? But why make it seem like the Scions are going to be like meaningfully divided by the contest for the throne? I'm going to be honest. I feel like they were too afraid to have us actually fight or work against our friends, and yeah, I gotta say, like, that's a little disappointing to me. I didn't need Dawntrail to, like, blow my mind and continue pushing the envelope in ways the story has never before, but I just wanted a little bit more here. All right. I was getting exhausted. Recording last night, it was late, and I think the negativity wasn't helping, if I'm being honest, but I'm back with some pep in my step because I finally get to talk about the part of the story I really liked. Okay, so after the attack on Tuliolal, Zerul Jah challenges Wuklamot to throw down. So we go back to our trolley boys, we get geared up to blast through the mysterious dome, we get a good action cutscene and an even better dungeon. I'm sure I've already said this, but the dungeons this expansion do not miss. Also, I misspelled dungeon as fungin here on my document, but I'm leaving that because it works. All that excitement leads up to a nice pause once we get inside. Heritage Found, I think, is like a really nice break from the previous zones, which, although they've been gorgeous, they're all very grounded, right? They all feel like real areas in the real world, or like they could be, right? Whereas Heritage Found looks very interesting, unique. It's like a mishmash of two worlds kind of crammed together in space and time, which we come to find out is exactly what happened when the dome appeared in our world. We also learned that it's been about 30 years for the people inside the dome since its appearance, even though it's only been a few days for us outside the dome. We learned about the devices that everyone was wearing on their heads that Zeralja had earlier. They can save you from getting killed, but not dying of old age. And when you finally do die of old age, it erases other people's memories of you. Oh, and we meet Sphene finally, who we've only seen before in like quick shots and cutscenes watching us from a distance, but we finally meet her, we get to know her, what she's like as a queen. I think the game does a really good job the whole time not letting us forget that she's kind of sussy, you know? Something sussy's going on with her. We learned that Zarulja met Sphene. He made a deal with her to be king of Alexandria, so that kind of explains how he commands her army and how he's got so strong. And also, it's worth pointing out that Alexandria is apparently an FF9 reference. I've seen a lot of people talk about this, and I've heard about a bunch of things being references to Final Fantasy IX, but having not played FF9, I don't know if that makes it better or worse. So if you've played FF9, let me know what you thought. But I will say, for me, didn't detract from the experience. Like, there's a character who shows up named Otis, who's apparently like a big reference to another character in FF9, and I will say he worked really well for me. Like, very likable. I think his role in the story worked. The fact that he was a reference didn't impact it at all. I loved this character. He's essentially a man whose essence and memories have been transferred into a machine, and it's a good exploration of like what it means to be a person, and it brings into question whether having a body made of flesh is like an important factor in that. Like, how much of your humanity is wrapped up in being human. I'm a big sucker for things like this in 14, moments or characters that raise like interesting philosophical questions. They're rarely super deep, but they're far from shallow in their exploration of these topics either, and they usually explore from different angles, which makes it really good. Like, for example, Otis is not the only person, quotation marks, who we interact with whose body has passed on. God. Kakuya. I swear to God, the actual worst part of this expansion is the names, guys. Don't let them forget that. Aaronville's mom plays a huge role in this second half of the story too, introducing us to like the underground resistance group. And the reveal that she's actually passed on and is one of Sphene's endless who resides in that final zone, living memory. It's a good way to have an actual story unfold that can keep our attention. If I'm being honest, not every aspect of the story makes like super coherent sense. There's still plenty of stuff to nitpick in Heritage Found and in Solution 9, but I think the big difference between this second half of the game and the first half is that there's so much mystery around every corner that it keeps my brain guessing where the story is going to go next, instead of giving me time to think about like, well, how crazy is it that these people run their government like this? That doesn't make any sense. Which is like what I did a lot in the first half. A good example of this is Little Ja Rule, Zarulja's son, who's named after his father that he killed. There's so many questions, like especially in hindsight, about like, how was this kid even made? I think, like, I'm pretty sure Zarulja is like the only lizard here, right? Why is this kid allowed to just run around and do whatever he wants without consequences? Like, I understand that Zarulja abandoned him, but doesn't he feel like keeping tabs on him? Like, if I killed my dad, right? I challenged him to battle and slew him in the arena. I'd probably be worried that one day my kid might grow up and do the same to me. Like, that would just be like karmic justice. But I will say though, these are all thoughts that I had after the fact. The point I'm trying to make here is that in the moment, I was hooked by the story, right? And that's really, I think, the assignment that FF14 has. Keep us engaged while we're in it. There's so much high fantasy bullshit, and there always has been, and none of it makes any sense. And I don't just mean in Dawntrail, right? I mean in basically every expansion in every part of this game. But the story and the characters and their interactions with each other and with us, that's what draws us in, that's what makes us care. And I think that's why we like this game, or I mean, that's why I do. That's how it is for me. Moving on. When we finally make it up to the top floor of Everkeep and we fight Zarulja, I'm locked into that fight because it's a great fight, right? Great music, it's challenging, they've really stepped up the encounter design, and the cutscene after is tender, it's heartfelt, even though I still have a million questions about little Ja Rule's existence. Again, those names, keeping them straight. But I still have like so many questions about that little guy. Maybe it's just because I'm a parent and every scene where a parent dies in front of their kid like automatically makes me tear up, but yeah, that scene worked for me. I feel locked in. And Sphene's heel turn right after that, where she takes the key and disappears into the other realm, even though I think most of us saw that coming, it was still very dramatic in that moment. And once we finally get to go through the portal that we found like 5 levels ago, finally, sweet release, the emotional punches just keep coming. Living Memory, the final zone, is basically a series of goodbyes being said to various loved ones. And even though these are just video game characters, most of whom we met fairly recently, by the way, it still got emotional during these. I've seen criticisms of some of these individual farewells, particularly Kryle's parents, because they were built up a lot for us, I think, and it would have been difficult to live up to our hopes, and I think that they fell kind of flat. I think it's fair to say that, especially in hindsight, but in the moment, I think it mostly worked for me. It did what I was talking about, right? It accomplished the assignment, it kept me engaged. And seeing each zone depopulate as we deactivate each terminal, I think was a good choice. I've also seen some mixed opinions here on that decision as well, but in my view, it really helps give weight to what we're doing. We don't really have a choice in the matter, right? Sphene cannot be allowed to continue sustaining living memory on souls from other worlds. We just can't. But like every great villain in this game, especially the best one, it's good for us to get to understand what drives them. That's what makes them great villains, right? And actually on that note, the similarities between Sphene and Emmett Selk are very obvious and apparent, all right? Both are motivated by a love for their people, a desire to preserve them, or something along those lines. And Sphene, coming after Emmett in the story, does detract a little bit from her ending. Thankfully, the fight against her is really good. So good, in fact, that even Wooklamot jumping in to help doesn't ruin it for me. And even if it feels very similar to Emmett or Hades or whatever we end up calling him, there's still a lot of emotion in her story. If you're gonna repeat a villain, right, you might as well pick the best one. That I forgot to mention, but this video is getting long, so real quick before I wrap up though, I do want to take a quick moment to point out that despite all my complaints here, I know there were a lot, especially with the first half, almost all of the gameplay stuff is really, really, really good, right? The solo instance fights are, I think, some of my favorite of any expansion, probably some of the best. Jarul Jaw is a really fun fight, and we get to repeat it again, having like repeated mechanics but with added complexity. And even the fight where we play as Wooklamot, I thought was really fun, and I'm normally not a big fan of those battles where we have to play as like one of our party members, and I'm definitely not a fan of Wooklamot. So them pulling that off, I think, is really impressive. And aside from the return of those fucking stealth missions, I swear to God, aside from those, it's nothing but wins across the board. And I guess my chief complaint would be that it's not even that the story is bad. I just would like more battle content. And in the second half of the story, that one definitely delivers a lot more of what I'm used to getting. The battle content remains great. The story works well in the moment, but I'd still say, compared to recent expansions, the story has more than a few weird plot holes. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I wish Kryle and Aaronville had gotten more of a focus. Yeah, I'll say it again. The story is fun and engaging in the moment, but I'm not sure it'll hold up in the long run. I think in the future we'll look back on this expansion as probably one of the weaker stories in this game, but I do still think it deserves I do still think it reserves that mixed review score on Steam, but I think there's a lot that gets set up in the second half that could potentially take us to some really interesting places. We'll just have to wait and look forward to it. Fingers crossed, patch content raises the quality of this expansion quite a bit. I think it's more than possible, especially knowing this team. Alright gang, that's it for me. Thanks for sitting through this one. I know it was a long one, but now that I'm done, I won't ever have to talk about Dawntrail's story ever again. Okay, Jen, got it. Don't let them think about that too much. Clip it, ship it.